Rukatapacha, rakapacha kautula kapatalamanta. Just daydreaming about a friend of mine asking how I was after I posted a video about do you value feelings over truth? I watched it back again. It's interesting. I've had many conversations since posting that video, and it's really expanded my perspective on it, which is, which I'm proud about because that's what valuing truth over feelings did for me. Was that it actually allowed me to expand my perspective broader than it was. But the irony, the sheer irony of watching myself back was that I'm talking about you gotta value truth over feelings when of course I'm so caught up in feelings myself in expressing it, which is actually that because that's what truth over feelings does, and this is what I learned from discussions. It's actually important to reconcile, and they need to be integrated within each other. And the point I was really trying to get at with oh god, I always hate making videos. The point I was trying to get at with that is that in tough conversations that are very provocative, particularly now, like I'm very deep down the QAnon conspiracy hole, all that jazz, and so I have formulated my own perspective on the coronavirus and the intentions behind it and the metaphysical meanings behind it, the metaphor of it occurring in like as a its being as in existing is a symbol of something within the collective consciousness, and the fact that it is called the coronavirus, and the fact that so much of mainstream media has been flooded with occult symbolism. This whole period of time feels like an initiation into the deeper aspects within us, and I kind of intuitively was picking that up before the whole corona thing hit, and partly of what I felt really driven to express was the need for truth, the need to value truth, to get to the core of what's going on. The issue is that if you value truth over feelings, then the feelings don't get reconciled, and you don't masters live in the middle. That's really the lesson I learned from what people were telling me. And you need to value both, but unfortunately, and particularly with such inflammatory global hype, which is how the media is spinning it, which I think is mostly fake. And I think there's a deeper agenda going on with what we are being told as the public, because the stats, from what I found, is that influenza currently at this time is killing more people than corona. And statistically, the deaths and the mortality rate and the morbidity rate, like, is, even though it may be an infectious virus, the just general immunity of people can knock it off. And instead of hyping and worrying about sanitizing everything, where's the information about how to bolster your immune system and look after yourself like that? Like, where's the field of propagating positivity that will empower people rather than the fear tactics which are swamping. I'm not saying ignore the facts, and I'm not saying ignore the protocols and all that stuff. I agree with that, and I think isolation is important. I think that's also part of the agenda, is to actually keep people isolated whilst a lot of undercover arrests are going on to take out the deep state and other conspiratorial things that a lot of people think is bullshit, but let us see in a month or two. Hopefully it'll all come out to the surface, and if not, then things will just progress in the way that source and nature and spirit intends. So the point being of all this is that valuing truth equal to feelings is really, 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 really crucial in these times. And truth is quite a broad term, as is feelings. they're broad for a reason, because in my vernacular and me trying to articulate my ideas, that I use broad terms like truth and feelings, because truth can mean many things. Like, what is my truth? What is my inner truth? For some people, like a friend of mine who really got, I think, triggered by one of my posts and said, no, I will always value kindness. And then a bunch of people smarring me saying Trump's a rapist and a pedophile. And I'm like, well, okay, if you actually valued truth on par with feelings, why don't you back that point up with some evidence, and we can have a conversation? Because I asked those same questions, I went investigating, and I didn't find anything culpable of that, right? And that's where I started to learn that the media has been fake news. It's like, this wasn't the impression that I got of this thing. And then I realized that's because I've literally been programmed by these mass media agendas, which is literally the act of a dark magician. What I mean by that, what is magic? Magic is, it is magic that, look, everything in this room existed as a thought before it existed in physicality, existed as an idea before one took action and actually made something about it. Magic is literally shifting the thought forms, paradigms, perspectives through symbolism, through art, through references, through unconscious references, through symbolisms, through energy work is another realm. But that really only affects you if you partake in that. If you close the doors to any energetic fields, then you've closed the doors, and it won't partake. But valuing truth with feelings is, what is your existential truth? Because this is how you protect yourself in this whole environment of what's going on and all these crazy things and all these fucking weird paradigms, like conspiracy theories, deep state is being taken out, energy work, occultism, symbolism, coronavirus, like, who knows? The truth, as I see it, is that the actual truth of reality is unknowable. is actually unknowable. And if you're an atheist, you need to be very careful that you aren't a dogmatic atheist. To be honest, I have much more respect for people who are agnostic than I do people who are atheist. Because atheism becomes a bit of a zealot. Like I was about valuing truth over feelings. And atheism becomes a bit of a zealot for the dogma of empiricalism. But the reality of the universe is that you will never know the universe in its entirety, because we live in a multidimensional spectrum. Just like we observe in a finite spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, that's what we can see. So we also exist in a finite, we experience a finite expression of a multidimensional spectrum. Because the truth is, we don't know what makes an atom. The God particle is not the definitive thing. It's not the end all. To value truth is to actually not value certainty. It's actually to value uncertainty, because the whole universe itself is utterly unknowable. And from a lot of channelings and a lot of light working beings that have, you bring yourself into an altered state of consciousness and information comes through. A lot of channels that I've seen talking about that from multidimensional beings, they say, like, well, we don't know either. We don't know that's why we call it the great mystery, the universe, or the isness is probably, the isness is the term I got for my own framework. That I talk about the field of creative information, because that kind of takes on board a lot of ideas of quantum physics and turns it into something very palpable. And any artist, any creative will tell you that, they're not a generator of ideas. This is, I think, the thing we have to get away from in our existential notion. We don't generate ideas. Ideas come through us. And the degree to which you can clear your channel, which is just your being, spiritually, in terms of your mindset and your thought patterns, the magic of who you are, which is why unicorns are such a big phase at the moment, because this is that's why they're popping up in culture, because they're symbolic for that aspect of the mind. This is also why the feminine, and hashtag Me Too and all these other movements, why the feminine is such a big concept at play at the moment, because it is the feminine, the realm of the feminine, that nurtures the inner child, which nurtures the magic, the connection point to the field of creative information within us, which is a source of flow, right? The masculinity is the one that actually takes that creative information and then manifests it in something else. And this is why I realize it's really important to value truth and feelings, because truth is of that realm of the masculine, of taking action and understanding and actually, because you can think a lot of thoughts, you can have a lot of creative information, but at the end of the day, you've only got a limited amount of time here in this place, so you better value what you're doing, right? Because you're going to die eventually. So what you do should be of existential value to you. And we really are trained that that's not a big issue. We're just be sarcastic. We're just sarcastic can be fun, but everything's irreverent. There's no such thing as divinity. There's no such thing as sacred. Look, I'm telling you, this pen is divine. The divine and the mundane are imbued within each other, and that's the truth of it, because the field of creative information that constructs who you are also constructs this pen, the connection of which is unknowable. We really don't know. It brings you, the truth is that you should be humble. You should be really in awe of the existence within you and understand that you are an expression of that all power, all divinity, everything, of existential substance, profound existential substance and nourishment and fulfillment comes from within your being. Nothing external could ever satisfy the knowing of the miraculousness and the miracle of your own being. And valuing truth and feelings is also to value science and spirituality, logic and intuition. And these two make up the dualistic spectrum of our experience. And I think it's very wise to nurture both of these things so that you can come into a transcendent perspective of the universe. And that is what ancient cultures did for thousands, if not millions of years, actually. And I think a big part of the collective awakening in who and what we are as existential beings and the history of humanity is going to start coming out through archaeology. And that's why I'm posting a lot of archaeological discoveries, just to get people questioning that, actually, human history doesn't go to 5,000 BC. It actually goes up to 10,000 BC, 20,000 BC, 60,000 BC. And I'm talking about technological civilizations that had the capacity to build enormous megalithic structures that we would struggle to do today. Now, if such primitive people, 60,000, just even 10,000 years ago, 8,000, to give a more easy in access, if you just Google Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, that's 8,000 BC, already predates the current academic model. Huge and Gadam Padang, 20,000 years, that's a very interesting one. Really big megalithic sites. For primitive people that didn't have any technology, you're honestly going to say they obviously knew something that we didn't know. If they didn't have, there's no evidence of advanced technology like hydraulics and other things like that. Yet they had a deeper existential wisdom of how to regulate this multidimensional phenomena that is our being. And that's just a simple reality. You know, this quantum entanglement, which is what Einstein called as spooky action at a distance, is where two subatomic particles, so things that make up atoms, two subatomic particles can be infinite distance apart, yet they will react and respond to each other instantaneously. Spooky action at a distance, right? The whole field of quantum physics was created to explain this phenomena, which it still hasn't really explained it yet. All we understand is that there are multiple dimensions to our reality, which would, in a hyper-dimensional space, like a hypercube, in a higher dimensional space, these 2 points would be connected together. The indication, which is also supported by a theory called holographic universe theory, is that all points in time and space are interconnected and interpenetrating each other, that there is no such thing as separation. There is only the now. There is only the distinction of separation, which is the physical experience and incarnation. Yet, if you are to tap into your being, your existential being, you can tap into this field of creative information that is literally unbounded. It is the whole of awareness. And this has proven to be physiologically the case, that you receive benefits from this field of creative information from what's called the Transcendental Meditation Clinic. They did research in the 80s, back when quantum physics was coming out. Actually, it was coming out before that, but like, I guess into mainstream, I guess you could say. They proved that a transcendental state of awareness is the number one thing to treat heart disease. Like, your body has innumerable benefits. Your whole brain homogenizes with itself, and you have a flooding benefit of your being, because you are literally tapping into the source of creation within your cells, and the whole behavior of the system energetically starts to become in attunement. You know, we have so much more power than the mainstream would have you believe. And particularly with the coronavirus, so much of the hype, I think, is actually, although there's another conspiracy side to that I just can't, it's just so big I can't really explain it in this video. My point being is that we have so much more power within our own being and our own physiology than is talked about or taught about. You know? These discoveries about Göbekli Tepe and Nikola Tesla, for instance, you know, his quote, if you want to understand the universe, think of it in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Right? Nikola Tesla also created the AC generator and created the modern world, the modern digital world. The electrical age was due to his inventions. Yet, why was I not taught about him at high school? Why was I not taught about these ancient global megalithic civilizations that exist all around? You know, what we are taught to believe is literally the act of dark magicians, as in shifting the concept of what we understand about the world and therefore understand about ourselves, so that we behave and act a certain way. The reason why I asked people to value truth over feelings was really just a kind of kick in the balls, kick in the butt, to just kind of get off the feeling bandwagon and the reactivity bandwagon and actually ask questions. Be fucking skeptical as shit. Ask so many questions about why. Just go deep and deep and deep and deep. And, you know, health is a really big way to start with that. It's like, for me, like, why have I been so unhealthy? Why have I had so much depression and manic depression and verging on psychosis and all these other things? I'm like, because I had fucking heavy metals in my body. I tested positive for mercury and lead, and yet the whole dialogue in the mainstream media of metals being in the system is disregarded as not important. You're not supposed to have any lead or mercury in your system. Where the fuck did I get lead and mercury? Like, I haven't gone to anyone. I haven't done any, like, mining work or anything like that. You know, did I get it from fish? Did I get it from vaccines? What are they putting in vaccines? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Where's the definitive things like this? Like, where's the empowerment of the self rather than being dependent on a system? You know, a healthy system, a good parent, is one that empowers the individual instead of labels them as you are disadvantaged, you are that, da 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 da. Instead of labeling them, be like, here are opportunities so that you can take it at the bust. And such opportunities include, how do you regulate your system? How do you breathe? How do you form healthy relationships? You know, what is your existential being? What is this phenomena of the observer? Right? Like, I am not my thoughts. I am not my reactions. I'm not my physical sensations. I am the awareness looking at it. That's a fundamental, universal, existential, reality, like, observation. You know, why the hell wasn't I taught that? That's literally fundamental into existential being. And I think this time of the coronavirus and all this isolation is the prime opportunity to be asking all of these questions. It's just my perspective, and so.